Benicia, California, December 20th, 1968. At 11 p.m., local resident Stella Borges drives along a darkened stretch of Lake Herman Road.
Miss Borges comes around the bend, and then suddenly she sees two bodies lying motionless on the ground. She's shocked, but she knows well enough not to linger. So she keeps driving until she can flag down a police car.
And when the police come, they're able to identify the two individuals. Betty Lou Jensen, who's 16 years old, and David Faraday, who's 17 years old. Just two high school students on their first date.
Detectives examine the bodies and see that David was killed by a single gunshot behind his left ear. Betty Lou was shot 5 times in the back.
Police are stumped why anyone would commit an execution-style murder on an innocent high school couple.
There was no evidence of any robbery or sexual assault of any kind, which led them to believe that it might have been a random attack by a stranger.
For 7 months, police have no leads. Then, on July 4th, 1969, they receive a shocking phone call.
The call is taken by Vallejo police dispatcher Nancy Slover. And the caller speaks in a very low, monotone voice and describes where 2 bodies can be found. He also states that they've been shot with a 9mm Luger. And before he ends the phone call, he also says, "I also killed those kids last year."
Police rush to Blue Rock Springs Park in the city of Vallejo, 4 miles from the first crime scene. When they arrive, they find another young couple inside of the car, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds.
EMTs quickly transport the victims to the hospital. 22-year-old Darlene Ferrin is pronounced dead on arrival, but 19-year-old Michael Majot survives.
Michael is badly injured, but he's still able to describe what happened. He says that they were randomly attacked by a stranger who shined a flashlight in their faces right before he fired 5 shots.
He describes the suspect as a Caucasian, about 30 years old, 5'8", 200 pounds, with short curly hair.
The Bay Area now has a serial killer on the loose. He's claimed 3 victims so far, nearly 4.
Almost a month after the Vallejo attacks, the killer contacts local press. He includes a strange 3-part coded message, or cipher.
On July 31st, 3 Bay Area newspapers received 3 virtually identical handwritten letters from someone who claims to be the killer. He demands that a cipher, which is included with the letters, be published on August 1st, or he threatens to kill more victims.
The cipher and the accompanying letters are published as demanded. Then, on August 4th, another letter arrives.
This letter, sent to the San Francisco Examiner, says, "Dear editor, this is the Zodiac speaking, and now our killer has a name."
Zodiac.
A couple in Salinas solved the first cryptogram by using what they call a crib. That's where you guess the words and phrases that you think might be in the cipher, and then you go from there.
They believed that the cipher would contain the word kill, so they looked for pairings of certain symbols that could represent 2-letter L's, and they were successful. The message read, "I like killing people because it's so much fun."
Once they verified the corresponding symbols for that phrase, the rest of it they solved pretty quickly.
Zodiac's following ciphers are infinitely more complex, and for 51 years, cryptologists don't even come close to solving the remaining ciphers. Investigators wonder if this is one of Zodiac's tricks.
Then, in 2020, an all-star group of decoders takes on the challenge, hoping to crack one of the 3 unsolved Zodiac ciphers.
I got involved with this case about 15 years ago. We decided to try to decode a 340-character cryptogram by Zodiac that he'd mailed on November 8, 1969. We planned to use a method called homophonic substitution, and that's where one letter might be swapped for multiple symbols.
The team creates a powerful software program that processes millions of homophonic substitutions per second.
They run this software program for months and months, and not much happens. Then one day they run an updated version of the software, and they finally solve the cipher.
Over time, we were able to identify a few phrases that ended up being part of the right solution. Phrases like "trying to catch me" and "gas chamber." Once we saw those phrases, we took a closer look in our experiments, and after a little bit of effort, we were able to unlock the entire message.
The newly decoded message picks up where the last cryptogram left off.
It said, "I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show." Which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise. So they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise. If this one can be solved, then maybe the other two can be solved as well. And maybe that will tell us who the killer is once and for all.
Among those eager to solve the remaining cryptograms is Parisian engineer Faisal Zarawi. In 2020, Zarawi zeroes in on one in particular.
Zarawi writes his own software to tackle what is thought to be the most difficult cryptogram of them all.
On April 20th, 1970, the Zodiac sends a short cipher consisting of 13 symbols, known as the Z13. Because it's so short, it makes it much more difficult to crack.
It begins with "My name is," followed by a 13-character cryptogram.
So solving the cipher is actually supposed to provide us with the Zodiac's name.
Once again, modern technology provides a breakthrough. Zarawi's software translates the cipher as the letters K-A-Y-R.
To many, the translation sounds like gibberish. But veteran Zodiac investigators immediately recognize the name.
Detectives who study the Zodiac's letters know that he misspells quite a few words. We think that's often deliberate, and that K-A-Y-R might just be K-A-Y-E.
This potential solution generates excitement about a decades-old lead. In 1973, Escalon police detective Harvey Hines is assigned to the case and keys in on an ex-convict named Lawrence K.
Hines begins looking into Kay after noticing that Kay's mugshot bears a striking resemblance to one of the Zodiac sketches.
The Zodiac is described as a male between 40 and 45 years old, 5'9" and 165 pounds with dark-colored hair. Lawrence K is 45 years old, 5'9", dark hair, and 160 pounds.
Lawrence K is a convicted criminal with a long history of arrests for voyeurism as a peeping Tom, prowling, burglary, and more.
This is important because criminals don't just jump straight to murder. Their crimes usually escalate.
Perhaps most surprisingly in Kay's background is that in 1942 he's admitted to the Navy's Radio Material School in Chicago, where he's trained in electronics, but more importantly, in coding. This may have also given him access to the military's wing walker boots, which would match the prints at the Lake Berryessa murder site.
Hines next tracks Kay's movements on the days surrounding the Zodiac killings.
Kay lives at 217 Eddy Street in San Francisco. That's only 2.5 blocks away from where the cab driver Paul Stein picked up the Zodiac on the night he was murdered.
Hines also discovers that Darlene Farron, who was murdered at Blue Rock Springs, worked at Iran's Cafe, which was just 2 blocks from Kay's apartment.
When Hines interviews Darlene's sister, Pam Huckabee, she recognizes a photo of Kay. Apparently, he often came to the cafe to pester her sister, to the point that Darlene was very afraid of him.
But Hines needs more than circumstantial evidence to make his case.
Detective Hines contacts Brian Hartnell, who survived the Zodiac's knife attack at Lake Berryessa, and he's heard the Zodiac's voice.
Hines secretly records a conversation with Lawrence K and then plays it for Hartnell. And without hesitation, he says, "This is the voice of the Zodiac."
Hines next pays a visit to San Francisco police officer Donald Falk. Falk rushed to the crime scene on the night that the cab driver was murdered in San Francisco. For years, Falk has claimed that he may have crossed paths with the killer that night. He saw someone suspicious who matched later descriptions.
But those descriptions weren't out yet, and he was on his way to a murder scene, so he didn't stop. But Falk claims he's never forgotten that face. When Hines shows Falk a picture of Kay, he states that out of the hundreds of mugshots he's seen since the murder, Kay's picture bears the most resemblance to the man he saw that night.
With 3 witnesses identifying Kay as the Zodiac killer, Hines takes his report to Captain Roy Conway and Lieutenant James Huston of the Vallejo Police Department.
Hines thinks he's solved the case of the century, and he is expecting a huge pat on the back.
But after Conway and Husted read his report, they basically say, "Thanks, we'll get back to you." And they never do.
Discouraged, Hines calls in one final favor.
Of course, cops know a lot of other cops, so Hines sends his report to 2 San Bernardino detectives he knows and begs them to take a look at it.
The 2 detectives read the report and they believe it. They think it's good police work.
These 2 detectives fly up to Lake Tahoe. They go to Kay's home. They ask him his whereabouts on the night Paul Stein was murdered, Darlene Ferrin, all kinds of stuff. Kay has an answer for everything.
Kay cooperates with investigators, supplying his fingerprints and handwriting samples.
So Hines is at home, and he's waiting with bated breath to hear from the 2 detectives. They eventually call him, and they say that based on Kay's answers and the handwriting sample, they concluded that he is not the Zodiac.
Kay passes away in May of 2010. By this time, he's changed his name to Kane, C-A-N-E, but he's never arrested for the murders.